This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. The time has finally come. Welcome to SOW, Modern Change Lifecycle Launch and Learn. My name is Christopher Elliott. I will be your host today, but you will not be hearing a ton from me. I will have a few slides in the beginning, but you'll be mostly hearing from our Principal Product Manager, Greg Morrison, as he walks through our slides, and Isaac Bartz, as he will be helping to answer some of your more technical questions in the chat. We're really pressed for time today, so I am going to move fairly quickly through my slides. Greg, can you go to the next slide, please? So, as you can imagine, there will likely be forward-looking statements made in this call and calls coming after. I do just want to point out that if we do make any comments about our roadmap, they are not promises or guarantees. Things are likely to change, most likely will change. So if we are talking in forward-looking statements, just take that with a grain of salt. Agenda for today, going to do a quick little spiel about who's on the call with you today. We'll be talking about this program, goals, expectations, the calendar, and then I'll be handing it off to Greg, who will talk to you more in depth about what modern change and SOW look like. With that, again, my name is Christopher Elliott. I've been a product manager here at ServiceNow for about 8 months. My general role is to be the voice of customer lead for ITSM. What that means is I advocate for the customer. My goal is to close the product expectation gap between ServiceNow and all of you. I essentially eat, sleep, and breathe customer feedback. So please be vocal during this call and all subsequent calls. We do listen to you and make sure that we're able to close that feedback loop internally as well as externally. On the personal note,
sorry, Chris. Sorry.
You're okay. On the personal note, I love houseplants, books, and a good adventure, and a laugh as well. I smile a lot, but let's go to the next one. Come on, Greg.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna do really brief. So I'm the PM for change, and I've worked on a couple different products at ServiceNow. Change management is my primary focus, but I've also done some work around service level management, site reliability management, or metrics. And also I was the original PM on the common services data model. So today my focus is very much around delivering the next generation change experience. And I just want to call out Cameron Richards on the call today with us, and he's the engineering manager for change. So we're very fortunate to have him here on the call. Isaac, you're up.
Hey, Isaac Bartz. I've been here at ServiceNow for 5.5 years. I'm a counterpart to Greg, and I'm what's called an outbound product manager. I focus on DevOps, change management, service operation workspace, primarily among a few other of our core ITSM technologies. And I began here as a solution consultant and have been in the product management role since 2021. And a couple of my hobbies there. I like hurting myself trying to learn carpentry, and we've got some really cool farming going on at my place right now. So nice to meet everybody.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Isaac. Again, hopping into what to expect from Launch and Learn. There will be bi-weekly sessions. There's a week we're skipping in July. We'll get into that a little bit later. But each session will encompass a walkthrough, a demo of some sort, followed by a Q&A and discussion. This call in particular will be a little bit different because it is an intro. There will be a lot of slides because we want to lay the foundation for what change is supposed to look like for you and what subsequent sessions will look like. But at the end of this program, you should be a much more mature user of change. The second aspect of this, again, is customer feedback. Please be vocal, ask the dumb question, ask the confusing question. If you hate it, please let us know. We will not be offended. I love to hear that. If you love it, please do the same. And the third aspect is surveys. You will receive a survey after this call. Please fill it out. There will also be surveys during this call. To the second point, we are looking to understand feedback, where you're coming from, and surveys one of the great ways that we're able to do that.
Hey, Chris, are you asking the customers on the call to basically post their questions in the Q&A, or do you want them to, how would you like to handle that? Just so everyone knows.
Oh, throw them in chat, please. It's okay to speak out loud, but please throw your questions in chat. If you don't feel comfortable speaking either in the chat or speaking up, the survey will also have space for you to ask additional questions in long form. So if you have something complicated and more technical, that would be a good space for that as well. But we do want to hear from you.
Are these slides going to be available?
Yes, I will be sending out these slides as well as the recording of the session once it's made available to you. And this program, again, trying to get through this so we can get to Greg's portion. But essentially, we have a number of questions we want answered from you, but the way that we look at this is we want to understand how we can enable you to be a more mature user of change. Is it the documentation that we're giving you? Is it that we are not looking at your solutions correctly? Do we not have an understanding of your roles in your organizations? That is what we're looking to gain from you. From this program, you look to gain a connection with the product PM, engineers. You'll have firsthand communication, live demos, walkthroughs inside the product. We're also going to try to look out for your support cases that get opened up through this program and try to follow those as well. Next slide, Greg. And this is the schedule for the program. One thing I would like to point out is that we will not be having a session on July 19th, as a couple of us will be out of office. Other than that, this program will be every 2 weeks starting from today's date. On Wednesdays at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We do have 7 sessions scheduled here, but if there is a great need for additional sessions or there's a new topic that we need to cover, extending this program is something that can happen, but we won't really be able to make that decision until we understand how the program is going.
All right. So again, my name is Greg Morrison. I'm going to start off with taking everyone through kind of a look back, if you will, at change management and how it's evolved over the years and the relationship with ITIL as well. So if you look back into the 80s, IBM started with some best practice guidance that was originally published as the Management System for Information Business. And part of this was IBM was trying to bring some standards to the way IT operations was running. So the situation that was developing inside IT, excuse me, was very much that IT leaders were scrambling to put controls in place to reduce the frequency and impact of change-related incidents. So what we saw happening in this time period was that these change control boards started to stand up, and we saw this model of change control be starting to emerge in the enterprise. But it came at a very high cost in the sense of constraining change velocity, if you will. But the idea was really to protect the production environment at that particular time. So change control was very much necessary at that time. In 1989, we saw IBM really shift sell the best practice guidance over to the Office of Government Commerce in the UK, which is where ITIL originally emerged. So when you think about change control, and I think we've all, or at least older people like me, have seen some of this over the years, but changes were reviewed in the weekly change control board meetings. And there was some pretty rigid guidelines around how changes were done. In fact, sometimes you'd see change managers take stands like, you know, if you don't have all the right collaterals or you're missing data, your change is going to be automatically rejected. Then we saw ITIL continue to emerge on the timeline. So we saw B2 come out, which was pretty solid guidance, and it was widely adopted by customers. And then in 2007, ITIL 3 came out with 5 publications covering 26 processes and 5 functions. And that's where we started to see the emergence of really the shift from change control to change management. So the ITSM community, excuse me, published the best practice guidance for ITIL. It was widely embraced across the industry, but it really had one missing piece, And that was, it never really addressed the dev elements of what was going on in IT or the technology organizations. So ITIL change management guidance brought a lot of standardization and clarity to IT operations, but it left many IT teams divided and fragmented because it wasn't clear exactly how to handle some of these dev practices that were really growing alongside of the ITIL framework. So at that time, we saw change control was starting to be go away, and we were seeing more change management, where we saw change managers really start to say, you know, our process is aligned to ITIL. You've got to follow it. If you don't meet the ITIL criteria, you need to change the way you work. This was a pretty common theme early on with some of the ITIL guidance, not in the publications, but the way it was implemented in practice. So as ITIL continued to move along, we saw a 2011 publication that was really an update to the 2007 release. And as a result of that, we saw that there was an ITIL 4 release that came out in 2020. And but the difference here in the situation was that product teams now had advanced tooling and inherent automation and controls built into their tool sets. So ITSM process automation, scalability, and extensibility were now considered table stakes for a lot of the activity around change. And manual change approvals in this world of change enablement are really the exception rather than the rule. So think about a world of change where it's very much driven by data, and we're doing those checks and balances, not just in change management, but all the way through the life cycle, from the point of ideation all the way through to the point that it's end of life in production, if you will. And what we're seeing here is that you know, there's remnants of legacy change control that still live in a lot of organizations and change management practices, but it's really important at this particular stage of the change journey, if you will, to make sure you're looking at how to deprecate some of those or move to new modern practices that can displace those. And frankly, I think a lot of legacy change programs that don't make these transitions are likely to be defunded or deprecated in the future. And we even hear this from developers in a lot of cases. In fact, I went to one of the cloud native functions a few years ago, and some of the developers were talking to me of like, we'll just go around it if it takes too long. That's the worst case scenario for us in the world of change. What we want to do is make sure change is fit for purpose and aligned with the needs of the business. So as a result, we're seeing change management start to roll off. And what we're seeing emerge is change enablement, where we've got change managers that are saying, let's partner to ensure the change requests are automated, safe, and delivered without delay. And the goal is to use data and automation to increase change velocity. So I'm going to kick off a Slido survey here. For those of you that haven't used Slido, and I promise you I only have 2 survey questions here. I just want to get a sense of the audience and kind of where you guys are in your journey. But if you can scan the QR code, if you can't scan the QR code, you can go to slido.com up here in the upper right-hand corner and just key in this meeting ID. But it's a very simple question just to ask around, what are the biggest challenges you have when you think about moving your organization from change management to change enablement? So I'll give you just a minute to do those. And if you have questions about how to get there, just please ask.
Can you scroll it up just a little on your screen?
Scroll it up.
Yeah, so I can get the full, I don't see the full QR code.
Oh.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. The QR code is cut off at the bottom.
Okay, that should work.
There we go. Sorry. Thanks for letting me know that, David.
And I got it. Okay.
Okay. I'm going to keep moving that. You can take that survey at your own pace. So let's talk about the ever-evolving dynamic of change. So early on, we saw service desk emerge, IT operations, and change really served as that final safeguard of protecting the production environment. And when we looked at change management in the 80s and 90s, we saw very much a lot of manual approvals, cab approvals, things that were relying on human beings to go look at them. And then we started to see a lot of other things start to emerge, like release management, We saw repositories like GitHub, GitLab, CI/CD, observability tools like Datadog, Dynatrace, QE Test. We saw teams starting to do more agile and CI/CD pipeline kind of activities, automated test frameworks, configuration management, and strategic planning tools. And what this really did is, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, it started to put a lot of strain on those legacy change management practices, because these manual approvals were starting to cause significant delays in the delivery of these technologies, features, and capabilities to the business. So the idea here really is to tear down that wall. And we, as you've probably seen in some of the launch and learn materials that Chris sent out in advance, we have several blogs around this, around, you know, breaking the change barrier and really starting to tear down some of these walls that really come along with legacy change management. Where we want to be is in a place where, you know, think of this like a software factory where you've got all of these pieces that we just looked at are all interconnected through a common set of tissue, being the ServiceNow platform and capabilities. And we're able to take all of these, whether it's CI/CD pipeline, IT operations, break fix type things, and bring them through seamlessly into the production environment. And if you notice change management here, these changes are mostly automated and there's only a few manual approvals in here. And the red lines in here that say centralized policy management are really signifying that these checks are happening throughout the delivery model. They're not just, change management is not solely responsible for making sure that all of that happens. However, I want to comment on that, and that is that we do have the tools and capabilities, and I'm going to cover some of them today, that show how you can still make sure that the criteria as you're crossing these different compliance checks are satisfied before they get to change. All right, so let's jump.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure.
I put it in the chat, but I didn't get a response.
Okay.
Your
Yeah,
concentration in talking about change seems to be focused on software. That's a percentage of what I do as a service provider, large scale.
okay.
More than half of change management has to do with things other than software.
For sure.
It looks like what you're doing, though, is completely focused on it. Is that your intent?
That is not my intent. I'm glad you called that out. That is not the intent at all here. This is just really to show the vision of kind of how this interconnected tissue is allowing us to collect data from all of these different sources and use it in decisions that we're making inside change management, or so that we can deliver things into the operational environment. You could apply this very same model to break fix scenarios or operational or infrastructure changes. It's not around software. This is just an example of like all of the moving parts that are come along with this emerging landscape that we're working in with change management now.
Okay.
Does that help?
Somewhat. I'm curious to see how you're going to address this from my customer standpoint, because a lot of what you're calling legacy change management is driven by them, not us.
For sure. And I want to be careful here, and I won't get off topic, but I'm not suggesting here that everyone scraps anything that they're doing that looks like legacy change management. What I am suggesting is, you know, from a ServiceNow perspective, we're very much driving to this model of next generation change, where we're using data-driven analysis to make decisions around change as opposed to human-driven analysis. And that can be applied whether it's in the operations environment, in the dev environments, in the SRE environments. It's common. And I'm going to go through a few use cases as we move through this. So I'll see if I can address that. If not, we can definitely have a follow-up conversation. I'm happy to help you with some of these.
Thank you.
And one of the things that's coming up too, Greg, just so you know, is a lot of individuals are saying, okay, great, we see the automation, we see these capabilities, and we're about to through these presentations, but how do we feel that it's going to be received, especially with high regulation industries? You've got government regulators, pharmaceutical companies along those lines. And what Greg and I will be doing is we'll be showing you the features, the functions, the software. But Greg, what would your response be to say, how are these highly regulated industries going to receive the information? And I'm kind of thinking a little bit about that elevator slide you and I talked about. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, great question, Isaac. Yeah, so keep in mind, everything we're doing inside change management, we're not compromising anything around governance or controls. We're basically just automating things. Even as we talk about change approval policies and things like that, there is still an audit trail of says who created that approval rule. So we can very much make decisions and maintain that auditability. I think the challenge is going to be for a lot of teams is auditors, internal or external, sometimes have a tendency to keep delivering and adding on to compliance criteria. But like many of us, they don't have the time to retract the old or update the old. So I think the burden is going to fall on change teams in some cases to have that conversation with your auditors of saying, look, we're not asking that you change the way you think about auditor, the guidelines that you're holding us to, but I want to show you how we can do it in an automated way without compromising stability or governance.
I would add to that and say with a lot of the next generation change features we're going to show you, you have better guardrails because the information is coming in directly as inputs, sometimes even from other systems. So do you allow trust of that data, right? Do you allow that information to help be a guardrail? And in a lot of cases, it's more improvement the more automation you have. So let's see. So Jay would like to see ServiceNow's perspective and framework. Okay, for intersecting continuous delivery, change management, and release management. Yes. Yeah, we will be getting to that.
Yeah, cool. So I'll go through this slide pretty quickly. This slide we've been, the change management team at ServiceNow, so Isaac, Cameron, myself, have really been working on this premise for about 2.5 years now to modernize change. So what we're hearing from enterprise change managers around the world is there's growing demands to increase change velocity and handle these high volumes of small incremental changes. And in some cases, there's exposing weaknesses in the legacy change management implementation, very much a representation of the slide I showed you previously where things are getting backed up a little bit. And what change managers are telling us is they need the ability to dynamically scale without compromising stability and governance, which I think we heard today as well. So what we're doing here is basically acknowledging that change managers are serving a wide range of enterprise constituents with varying needs. So it's very easy for a developer to say, hey, I want to go fast. But there's a whole kind of three-legged stool that goes along with that of stability, compliance, and governance and velocity. And so the idea of these tiered queues that are highly dependent on manual approvals and one-dimensional change models are causing unnecessary delays and deferred value realization for the business. The modern technology value stream really demands that the change process is highly automated, scalable, data-driven, and flexible. And the desired outcomes here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. These are like, I think, pretty much standard around the world in terms of how change teams are thinking about it. There's a really good book out that, at least from my perspective, I think it's called Accelerate, that talks about like change management and how developers view change management. And there's a lot of really interesting stats in there. For example, one that jumps to mind is there's really no clear evidence that longer lead times translate to increased change or a decrease in change failures, which means that, extending these lead times on changes may or may not have the impact that you're looking for. A better solution, and what we're really suggesting through some of these launch and learn programs, is to think about this in the concept of data-driven, where I'm doing those checks, but it's not really about lead time. It's more about, making sure you're conflict free, that you've got the right approvals on it, that, that you have the data necessary to do an evaluation of that change request before it hits the production environment. So what you'll be seeing today through the course of some of this is, with the things like change approval policies and change models or multimodal change, we're really driving more and more automation to augment those human capabilities that exist in legacy change management, if you will. So let's talk a little bit about our mission and change. And I'll get to the meat of this really quickly. I just want to make sure I set the stage for what we're going to be covering throughout the launch and learn here. So, you know, from our perspective, we want to get to a place where change is completely data-driven and it's matched with absolute precision to the use cases being served while eliminating artificial change barriers. So when you think about the work that we did around multimodal change, we very much started to tear down or extend at least that concept of everything has to fit in three predefined change types, if you will. We very much were thinking that there's lots of use cases and scenarios that don't snap neatly into there. So we want to make sure that we can align the change process or life cycle with those use cases. And that was the real thinking behind multimodal change. So just real quickly, early on, we saw central IT really leveraging the Now platform and change management. They can do workflows, integration hub, machine learning, AI, service graph, performance dashboards, developer tools. And then, of course, over the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen modern practices emerge like cloud native, observability, AI, ML. And as a result, we saw the emergence of these distributed teams that were starting to operate and wanting to do their work inside specific tools like Datadog or AppDynamics or whatever the case may be, Azure DevOps. And they were working outside of ServiceNow to a degree, and that's okay. And we really saw change as that digital fabric that's pulling all the pieces together so that those teams could take advantage of these underlying capabilities that come natively with the Now platform. So AI, ML capabilities, the ability to, you know, kick off an incident as a result of something that happened or raise a change request. And one of the things that we did, just to give you a quick example of this with the SRM solution, was we were doing evaluations of the error budget inside change approval policies to see if that team had exceeded or exhausted its error budget so that we could decide if we wanted to tag approvals onto it or auto approve that change if it in fact was low risk. So the message here is really this. Those teams that are working in these distributed environments can benefit by simply connecting them up to the ServiceNow platform through some of the techniques like DevOps change velocity and DevOps config and the SRM solution. And change management is in place today to be able to support those scenarios and really apply the right approvals and drive the right automation under the hood for that so that these teams don't have to worry about some of the details that exist beyond that. All right, let's talk real quickly through the themes that we've been working on, and then I'm going to jump into some specific features here. So first off, about 2.5 years ago, we started on this theme of velocity and automation, so breaking the change barrier, if you will. We introduced things like multimodal change. We had change approval policies in there. We introduced change success score, which is very much like a FICO score for change teams or assignment groups that says how good or bad is this team at delivering changes into the target environment. Risk intelligence. This is an ML capability that was incredibly powerful, and we did a bunch of analysis and work around this to make sure that we could do a really solid job of predicting change risk. Again, using ML instead of having humans evaluate the risk intelligence. And we brought a couple other capabilities along with that, which I'll share with you. DevOps change and DevOps config. Several releases back, we really rolled this up into the packaging of ITSM Pro so that customers that have an ITSM Pro license can take advantage of bringing these capabilities into the Now platform very easily through a series of webhooks. SRM integration is another one. I mentioned the use case there where we can evaluate error budgets. And then lastly, dynamic CI groups, where think about being able to group a set of CIs that are from different classes and raise a change request about them around that. And then we unpack that list in the affected CIs list so that we can see what the impacted services and offerings are that are going to result from this particular change request. So I put a V on here. This really represents velocity. Everything you see in the left-hand pillar is available today. The next one is really data-driven experiences. And this is where we are today in the journey with the delivery of change. So really what we're trying to do is we build a solid foundation around change automation in the velocity and automation pillar. Now we're working on really the experience side of this and adding more capabilities into what we're doing. So dynamic overview pages is really about rendering pages based on jobs to be done, rather than having a huge form that has every possible use case scenario described in that change form. And the knowledge worker looks at it and says, I'm not sure which fields I need to fill out here, or I don't need to fill out, and what level of detail. We really want to drive that experience so that your end users have a much better experience. And then as they're navigating through the change, they're getting a different view of what they're looking at based on the jobs to be done. Number two is new risk methodology. I'm going to be talking a little bit about this today, but basically this is really leveraging a de facto standard approach to risk evaluations, where we're using an input of impact and success probability to evaluate the likelihood that that change is going to be successful. Again, data-driven, not human-driven. Number four, or this cut line right here that you see, is kind of where we are in the work that we're doing right now. The next big item that we're going to be targeting is change compliance criteria, where we're going to take some of the change specific actions and required fields and roll them up into the models themselves. And if you're not aware of this, I just want to point this out really quickly. Change models is the future for us from a change management perspective, because it provides lots of flexibility for customers and extensibility. And more importantly, you can actually drive automation right inside the change model itself. So what we're thinking there is we'll do things like required fields, required actions, potentially what fields are read-only in those particular use case scenarios. Standard change certification is something we're going to be working on. So think about a governance and certification layer over standard changes. Change impact visualizations, configurable PIRs. And then real quickly, where we're headed is this concept of federated change, where we're at least enabling customers to think about change in a very federated way, where you could allow teams to have some degree of control over what they're doing in change management with approval policies or with change models. And they would still be bound through these digital contracts back to central IT change management, but you'd almost be giving them a set of guardrails. As long as you're operating in these guardrails, you can self-optimize and do what you're going to do. So let's spin into a couple of the features themselves. So change approval policies has been around for I think since around the Madrid timeframe, and Cam, feel free to jump in if I've got the release wrong. But this is a really powerful capability, and you can bring in inputs and evaluate them. So think about being able to check for active incidents or check for active outages or evaluate test results or config data. And then based on that data that's coming in, you're making a decision about what approvals need to land on this, in addition to the information that's contained in the change record itself. So it's really providing you a lot of flexibility to incorporate other data elements into the decision-making around change management. So you can auto-approve low-risk changes. You can evaluate a full spectrum of change-related data. You're still satisfying the regulatory requirements, because even when you look into change approval policies and there's a related list that says, which policies were applied, you can look in there and see who actually declared that approval definition and signed off on it, so that we know, even though it was automated, who said that if it matches these conditions, we're okay with moving forward with that. It's agile and responsive. I can quickly turn things on and off, add inputs. I can accelerate time to business or time to value for the business and increase velocity without compromising stability and governance. And then lastly, and probably most importantly for all of you, is the ability to tailor your policies with the organization's appetite for risk. So you could look at scenarios and say, when it's this change model or when it's this change type, I want to apply these policy rules around it. So incredibly powerful capability that is available, and like I said, as of I think the Madrid timeframe. So let's talk a little bit about change success score and some of the extensions we did there. So change success score, I think we released it in Paris, It's very much like a FICO score for changes. And the way we built this is super cool for you guys as customers and partners. It allows you to basically tailor this to meet your need. So we built this in a way so that you can define what these spans look like. In other words, what does low, medium, and high look like for your success scores? You can update your own success metrics. You can change the multipliers on the back end. So you can very much tailor what change success looks like in your organization and roll it right up into this change success score card inside ServiceNow. And if you click through here, you'll get some back-end analytics that will show you basically a leaderboard of who's doing well in change and who isn't. So think about this. It runs, it's an expression of a change group's success history. Excuse me, it calculates daily. There's a PA job on the back end. The multipliers are adjustable. It can be used to evaluate risk, but what I'm going to show you on the next slide is probably a good example of how to use it for risk. Some customers that I've talked to are using it for approval policies as well, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with doing it like that, but we really wanted to incorporate it as an input into risk, which I'll show you in just a second. What we did,
Greg, let me, can I stop you for, we have like a
for sure.
number of questions in the chat. And I just wanted to bring
for
up
sure.
the latest one if you could address it. Greg Troutman asks, is change success score intended to be a credit score for teams, or can it be used to show success scores for changes to a specific CI class, service, etc.?
Good question. So right now, change success score is very much around teams and assignment groups, if you will. What I'm going to show you next over here on the right is where you're basically looking across your change environment or your ecosystem, if you will, and looking at success in the context of change types and change models. And we're going to bring both of those together, but it is not, you know, at this point, it's not spanned beyond that particular set of use cases. And we want to be pretty cautious with this because there's some, and I won't get too far in the weeds with this, but you know, how you use this can vary from organization to organization. That we've had a few customers ask us about, could we do this at an individual level to see what the success score is for that? Potentially we could do something like that down the road, but it starts to cross into some areas of like, do we really want to put a number on an individual due to potential HR implications and things like that? Will we do that at some point in the future? We may add that as an option. At this point, we don't have plans to do that.
And just so everybody knows, there's a lot of questions about this right now. This is just telling you that there's going to be a deep dive on change success scores. We're only introducing individual concepts today. So awesome questions. Just know that this this is going to be discussed further and deeper in a session. And June 7th is what we have tagged at the top right. So the questions are great, but just know that there's going to be a deeper dive just focusing on this on June 7th.
Do you think you can incorporate some of these questions into that deep dive?
Absolutely. It'll be
Thanks.
the same format.
Yeah,
So,
I'm recording all of these questions, by the way, so they're not falling on deaf ears. We'll make sure to try to address as many of these as we can.
Yeah, Isaac, thanks for calling that out. It's really important. We're introducing concepts today around modern change, but we're going to do the deep dives on these. So bear with us if you can.
And you're saying this only applies to ITSM Pro?
no, this is standard.
No, these are no. Hold up. This is Pro.
Oh.
Both of these are ITSM Pro. The reason being is if you think about this, we're using PA on the back end to do the data collection.
Okay.
You have to have a PA license to do that. So both of these features are ITSM Pro.
But are these available in a ServiceNow dev instance? Just to get a hands-on?
Yeah, I believe they are. Cameron, do you know the answer to that? I think you can pull these up in a dev instance as well.
Yeah, again, as long as, I mean, they are pro license, but yes, you can absolutely load them into a dev environment to run through and test them.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to keep going just because we have a lot of content to cover here. Excuse me. But change success score on the left is all about teams. How good or bad are they at delivering changes into production, regardless of what change type or model it is? On the right, we're looking at how good are we as an organization at delivering changes, change types and models into our target environments, regardless of what team is doing it. And what we're doing is we're taking both of those, bringing them together into a success probability capability, which is can be configured and evaluated by the change teams to decide how they want to look at success or declare success in their environments. So the way we're going to use this, I'm going to jump into risk next, is basically with legacy risk scoring. We had a single condition builder that was really looking at risk and impact using risk conditions. And there was some overlap there between risk and impact, and it created at least some confusion, and there was no way to really evaluate success probability. So what we did is we built the success probability module, and you can configure this at an individual team level. And this comes back to kind of that federated approach to change. But you can configure the way you apply risk profiles to different teams or different scenarios based on the conditions that are happening. So I might say that I want to do, for a certain scenario, I only want to look at team success score. Another one I might say, I only want to look at change model success to see how good or bad are we as an organization. And then we have a third one that basically says you can bring those both together and decide how you want to evaluate them. And then we'll evaluate them that way to come up with a success probability for these. Again, you can do them at the team level or use condition builder to decide exactly how you want these applied. The other thing that we did here, excuse me, was we very much modeled what incident was doing for years around, if you think about it, you never set the priority of an incident. You're specifying urgency and impact, and we're deriving priority. We used a very similar model with this in change, where we're looking at impact and probability to derive risk. And again, these tables, this lookup table is fully configurable by you as a customer. There's no customizations in here. You basically just go in and configure how this behaves. And we're pulling the impact directly from risk conditions. We're pulling probability from the success probability module, and then we create an output. The other thing that we're bringing alongside this, and I think it's the next slide I have, but is risk intelligence, which is our AI ML capability that does a prediction of change risk to evaluate, what the likelihood of that or what the risk is of that particular one. We also have risk assessment. And the way we handle these is we basically always derive the highest value, as you probably know, but we brought along all four of these together so that customers can run one or multiple of these, and we'll always derive the highest value that's returned on these. So what we're really recommending to customers, specifically me, is that you should start to look at more data-driven approaches to risk and start to move away from risk assessments. Now, I'm not saying you abort them, because there's some real valid use cases around risk assessments, but the danger with risk assessments is they're very subjective in nature, depending on how you answer the questions, or you can essentially game the system in some cases based on how you want the outcome to look in terms of risk. So what we're suggesting is start to move more to these data-driven approaches using ML, using the success probability, the next generation risk, and risk conditions as well. Let me pause there. Were there any questions in the chat around that we need to address?
Not specifically on that. We just had one come up where if there's any improvement planned around conflict management. They have many change records with lots of conflicts flagged, and it's an area they struggle with to evidence that conflicts have been checked and agreed upon.
Yep, we are going to do some more work around conflict. I don't have anything concrete to share with you today, like in terms of dates or plans, but Cameron and I have had a number of conversations about how do we improve conflict, and maybe even look at categorization of conflict to determine which conflicts are critical, which ones are just be aware of them, that kind of thing.
Could you talk a little bit more about how the impacts are calculated?
Yeah, I'll do it really briefly though, because we have a lot of slides to cover yet. Essentially what we're doing in risk conditions is allowing you to make decisions around evaluate, is it a critical business service? Is it a, you can basically script it or use condition builder to determine how you want to evaluate input or impact. And then what we're doing is just acting as, or we're treating that as an input into the risk evaluation. So I'm going to move on to multimodal real quick. If you're searching through our docs, this is referred to as change models. There isn't a tag in there to search on multimodal yet. So if you're looking for this, look for change models. There's also a blog out on the communities around breaking the change barrier that I think is in the launch and learn stuff as well. But essentially, if you look at ITIL, there's a very rigorous change life cycle that's attached to that. And what happens is we end up backlogging a lot of change types and activities going on. What we did with multimodal is basically said, let's create a scenario where all of these models are fit for purpose. So in this case, and I used this example earlier, but for an SRE type change, we may want to just check to see if they have air budget available, then move them to an implementation and a close state. So notice we declared the state model here, but the real power of change models isn't just about declaring the states. It's really about driving the automation within this state model. So I can set up conditions and rules in here that say, if the air budget is exhausted, then you can't proceed in this case. That might be a scenario. And basically what we're doing is going through these different scenarios. I put this one in here specifically around unauthorized change because I want to show the power of being able to alter the sequence of the state model on the back end as well. So you can see on unauthorized, we start with a review state, then we move to authorized. We have a change receipt example or seed data that's in change models and cloud provisioning. You can see there's a number of use cases here. And what that does is it ultimately reduces the backlog for your normal changes that are happening in your environment. So real quickly on here, customer outcomes, automated approvals, automated state transitions, ability to self-optimize. Change models is a really powerful capability. And here's the beauty of it, is that the way we built this thing is if you are a change customer, and I know all of you are, and you have significant investments in workflow and you have done a lot of customizations in change management, you can basically bring change models up alongside it because under the hood, change types are using workflows, change models are using Flow Designer. So you can basically start to bring up models alongside your existing change types to protect that investment and then start to move your users and change volumes over to change models as you get more and more comfortable with what's happening with change models. Incredibly powerful capability, all property driven, something you should definitely look at. The last thing I want to mention on here is we do have advanced security options in here that allow you to control access of who can see these models, who can invoke them based on roles or user criteria. So a couple things, I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly, but when we talk about the digital fabric of change, we're really talking about bringing in site reliability engineering use cases, DevOps, change velocity, and DevOps config so that they can be evaluated and ultimately leverage the power of the Now platform. So let's just use a really quick example for change DevOps change velocity. This is part of your ITSM Pro packaging. So this is something that's really powerful and you should take advantage of it now. But basically we can pull data in from these sources and evaluate them with change approval policies to make sure the build's successful, it has the right test coverage, there's no incidents, it's not in a blackout period. And then we also have a set of metrics around this, or I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the dashboard. Isaac, which dashboard is this?
Insights.
Insights, thank you very much. And you can basically get a much more holistic view of everything that's happening in these environments. Service Operations Workspace. So what we did with Service Operations Workspace, this is a store release that basically rides on top of your existing change capabilities. So we're not asking you to modify your processes or change the things you're doing inside change management. However, this new workspace is really a unified workspace where we took our most impactful ITSM, ITOM, and SRE capabilities and brought them together into a unified workspace. And it's all driven based on business outcomes. So we started to move a little bit from thinking about processes and just objectives and outputs to business outcomes. And what are we trying to do with these new experiences and really helping users navigate the process. So we brought in ITSM Agent Workspace, Operator Workspace, and Site Reliability Operations all into this unified Service Operations Workspace. So this is a store release. It released in February. The change piece released in February. SOW as a whole released, I believe, last November. So we have the full change life cycle in SOW today, minus some things that we'll talk about in subsequent meetings, but CAB Workbench is still a legacy experience. All right, dynamic overview pages. I promise I just have a couple more slides and then we'll wrap this up for today. But this is dynamic overview pages, and I just want to give you a sense of the power behind this. So we talked a little bit about change models. Remember, you can declare the state model that is associated with a different change model. Again, these can coexist with your existing types and workflows. And essentially what we're going to do is when a knowledge worker selects a change model, we'll do a query against the underlying change model that was selected and return everything that's related to that change model. So we'll say in this case, there's state A, B, C, and D that you need to adhere to. And then when you move into approvals, we're looking at a single pane of glass for approvers where everything they need to make an informed decision is right there in front of them so that it's easy to make an approval decision around a change. We're going to continue to advance this to use more and more visualizations to minimize the need for approvers to have to understand CSDM and things like that of, you know, what's an impacted service versus an affected CI, those kinds of scenarios. We want to start to bring a simplification experience around that whole scenario. And then for implement, we want to provide a more operational view of the change. And then lastly, excuse me, when the change moves to a close state, we want to make sure that it's an auditor's view of that change, so that when your auditors come to you and say, show me these 5 changes, you basically give them the change record numbers and they pull them up and they have everything they need to look and audit that change. Where we're going with this is the ability to do federated change. So think about a scenario where you can apply different risk rules in different scenarios, or you can apply different change approval policies in different scenarios, whether that's DevOps or shared services or cloud infrastructure. And these decentralized change pods would be bound back to central IT by these digital contracts where we say, look, as long as you're operating within the framework that I've described, we're good. If you start to create major incidents as associated with your changes, we're likely to pull this back. So it just gives teams the ability to do what they're really good at, these dev teams, and that is to self-optimize within the constructs of these digital contracts. And then lastly, what we see from change is it becoming more of a central kind of center of excellence where change teams, if you think about that change enablement persona that we talked about, are really providing guidance and capabilities of how to navigate the change process. If a developer says, hey, I want to go faster, great, get your change success score up and we'll reduce the number of controls that are on there. Lastly, this is just the modern change checklist. If you think about change management, these are at a top level, the jobs to be done across the entire change lifecycle. And as you start to look at some of these, some things you can do right now are adopt DevOps change velocity. If you're an ITSM Pro customer, this is a plugin. You can turn it on and start to hook up some of your dev tools directly into the change process. Dynamic overview pages with SOW. Look at multimodal change. And then when we start to think about schedule and deconfliction, simplify deconfliction, we've reimagined the whole experience around scheduling assistant and incorporated it into SOW. You can simplify your change schedules and take advantage of that SOW change scheduling experience. Next generation risk, risk intelligence. And you should be starting to look at downgrading the use of that risk assessment capability due to the subjective nature of it. We really want to help customers get to a place where it's data-driven and we're getting to the right answer quickly. Success scores, change success score, change model success, impact, use the change impact assessment capability. Try and get aligned as best you can with CSDM. You'll have to work with your CMDB teams on this, but make sure you identify business applications and services and service offerings, and then use those dynamic CI groups where they make sense. For approvals, use change approval policies, look into auto approving low risk changes. and really start to think about CAB Workbench. What we're going to do with CAB Workbench in the future is create a much more agile and flexible version of CAB. There's just too much structure in it today. It doesn't mean that we're asking customers to pivot away from the structure. We just want to make sure there's flexible options that go along hand in hand with that. And then for change notifications is, our collaboration is basically use the collaboration tools, associate outage records, use SOW for validation, post-implementation reviews, relate incidents caused by change. And then lastly, use close codes and close notes associated with the changes, and tailor your SOW pages to your need, including the auditor's page, and then do change task management to make sure that the tasks are fully closed. So last polling question, let me jump over here and just turn this one on. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, you should be able to go back to Slido and let me just move that up real quick. Sorry about that, just to make sure everybody can get it. And this is the next question, is just what next generation change feature would you be implementing? And I get this is a really abbreviated session, so I'm not trying to pin you down on implementing something. I'm just, of what you've heard today, what's interesting and what would you go back to your organizations and kind of think, wow, I could take advantage of next gen risk or success scores, or, we do have dev teams. It'd be cool to work with them and see if we can start to bring that in, those kinds of things. So if you can take that survey for me, and then I know we've got a very 1 minute left, so it's not much time for questions, but questions that we can answer or follow up with you on.
Yeah, we've got a few here. So
maybe just one or two, Isaac, because we're at the top of the hour.
You got it. Okay. So I would say the one question here about CSDM, when you create a projected service outage from a change record, is it listed as a business service or business service offering?
So in SOW, we did a bit of a different set of work around outages. We brought outages back up onto the main page. In terms of the filter on there, Cam, maybe you can help me with this. I know you can do CI services. I'm not sure if offerings are rendered up in there or not. Do you happen to know off the top of your head? We might have to follow up with you.
Greg, this is something I asked you during knowledge, and I meant to follow up with you, and I didn't get a chance. But it's just confusing in the documentation as to what you're supposed to list.
Okay, I'll circle back with you on that, Aaron. So
okay, appreciate it.
That being said, I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, everyone, and all of your comments. The chat is very much popping off right now. We have a lot of comments in there. I promise you I am recording every single thing, and we're going to try to address them in upcoming sessions. That being said, I will be emailing by tomorrow morning the recording from this session, the schedule for future sessions, so you can understand where we'll be addressing some of these questions and comments from. And there'll also be a survey so we can understand if you didn't get to say something here today, maybe you got to sit down and think about it a little bit more and give us comments there. But again, thank you all. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me, and we will see you on June 7th. We'll be discussing success scores.
Thanks, everyone.
Really look forward to showing you the deeper dives. Hope this was useful.